think I've ever worn this shirt in a YouTube video. Check out my outfit. I'm in Savannah, Georgia, and I've been trying to serve some looks. I've been trying to look, dare I say, more posh, more sophisticated than I tend to look in Miami. I felt like I had to kind of spruce it up here, you know, being in Savannah. Savannah is my favorite American town. I have a video coming about my time here in a few weeks, but before that I have a few other travel videos. Those of you who have been following me, who follow me on Instagram, you know that I've been back at it again, traveling around the South. So tomorrow I have a new video on my time in Texas coming up, but I did want to put out this video today. Impromptu, this was unplanned. We have to talk about this because it relates to the content of my channel. So Bravo announced, hot off the press, Bravo announced, the TV network, that there is a new installment of The Real Housewives coming very soon, The Real Housewives of Dubai. Now, the reason I want to talk about this is it's really interesting because this news has sparked quite a bit of commotion. Some people are very excited. Some people are very excited because Dubai is known for like extreme wealth, ridiculous wealth, lavish lifestyle. And that's kind of like a return to what The Real Housewives originally was about. It was about very wealthy women living their ridiculously wealthy lives, and then like the stupid petty relationships that they would have. And really, if you think about it, that's kind of American TV has always, even pre-reality TV, living vicariously through very wealthy people on TV has always been a thing in American culture, American TV culture, American media. So a lot of people are excited about this new edition of The Real Housewives because it's kind of like a return to form. But if you look at social media posts about this, a lot of people in the comments are pissed. And it's really specifically gay people, LGBT people, and LGBT like allies who are upset by this because Dubai is known to not be a progressive place when it comes to gay rights. It's literally illegal. Homosexuality is illegal in Dubai, in the Emirates, United Arab Emirates. I am well aware of this. I went to Dubai in 2019. For those of you who were subscribed to my channel at the time, you might remember I made a few different gay dating in the Middle East, gay dating in Egypt. I for 2 months, about 2 months, I was playing Nomad in the Middle East, and I made videos on my time there. Those videos are still available to check out if you're curious. But so I have like a connection to this news. Like I have my own opinion as somebody who has been to Dubai and who has been to multiple countries in the region, but also somebody who's half Turkish. I am of course kind of biased when it comes to all of this because half of my family is Muslim and I have a connection to this culture. So for me, it's interesting seeing these comments and this like backlash because a part of me is like, I appreciate people standing up for something and saying like, you know, we should boycott anything that doesn't support gay rights and all this stuff. But a part of me is also a little heartbroken about this backlash because I can't help but feel that a lot of it comes from like an Islamophobic perspective and a xenophobic perspective. I just feel like a lot of Americans or people in the West in general, when they think of the Middle East, it seems like they think about like crazed men running around with axes, chasing gay people, chasing women, chasing anybody who's not Muslim. And of course there are some very conservative people in the Middle East. Of course there's extremists. There's also that anywhere. I mean, living in the US, there's this thing called the Ku Klux Klan. That's pretty extreme. If somebody, you know, is looking at us Americans from, you know, let's say Kenya, and they're like, wow, these white men wearing these gowns and, you know, they lynch black men. Like, it's crazy, but that's not a representation of the entire country. Racism is definitely a problem in the US, but I would argue racism is everywhere. Anyway, my point is, I just think Middle Eastern culture is very misunderstood and very much depicted in media, at least American media, as a one-dimensional culture, which is ignorant and offensive. The reality is Middle Eastern culture is all about modesty. In the same way that you're not going to see a pride parade with people in their Speedos, waving rainbow flags, you're also not going to see a woman, with her thong hanging out. You're not going to see people getting belligerently drunk. And I was just thinking about this earlier before I started making this video. I was thinking like people would be thrown off, or at least, the people who I saw in the comments, like with the backlash, to them it's crazy the idea of like gay bars are not allowed or not, or not legally permissible in a place like Dubai. But what I think those individuals also fail to recognize is bars in general are illegal in Dubai. It's a different mindset. It's a different culture. It's not an anti-gay specific thing. Yes, it's problematic to us from our perspective of living somewhere where, like, in America, freedom is like honestly, it's an obsession, to the point I think where sometimes it's counterproductive. I don't want to get into my whole political views, but I think for people who live in a society that is so constantly focused on the idea of individualism and individual freedom, it's difficult for people to understand how you could live somewhere where the government tells you you are not allowed to drink in public, you are not allowed to be at a bar. This is a don't ask, don't tell culture. It's all about you present yourself a certain way in society. There has to be decorum, there has to be tact, there has to be respect, there has to be order, there has to be discipline. Because the idea is this creates like a secure society. Now, of course, this is subjective, right? Like what's safe to somebody, what's secure to somebody might not be secure to another person. We can get into the philosophy of all of this stuff and what it entails for the government to tell you what you can and cannot do and so on. But as somebody who's been to Dubai, I have to tell you, there was something for me very endearing about being in a place where I felt completely safe, where there was complete order to everything, and I think it's also because now that I'm a resident of Miami, I'm used to seeing trashy people misbehaving on a daily basis. Just a few months ago, I remember this headline of literally like 5 to 10 blocks from where I live. A guy just pulled out a gun. He was high on shrooms. He pulled out a gun and he just shot somebody in the most touristy part of Miami where I live. Stuff like that just doesn't happen in Dubai. It doesn't happen because culturally people can't own guns. They can't just be on drugs. It's not accessible the same way as a place like Miami. So I understand the mentality that people have of like freedoms being restricted, but I think it's just a different cultural mindset. Whereas in Dubai, it's like, oh, we're not giving you a choice. We're not leaving this up to your parents or your community. We're deciding for all of you. So going back to the gay stuff, of course, as a gay person, it gives you some pause before you go somewhere when you discover that it's literally like in the law books. It's in the laws that you're not supposed to be gay. But what that means is they don't want you making out with a guy on the street in the same way that it's heavily frowned upon. It might even be illegal as well for a man and a woman to show that kind of affection in public. I think what's also important to mention is like the Middle East is not a monolith. Like you can't compare Dubai to like modern day Iran. You can't compare Dubai to some like, I don't know, small village in Iraq. Dubai is mostly made up of expats, first of all, the community. It's a very, very modern place. Now, of course, it's the typical kind of thing that you observe where when you're of a certain socioeconomic level of privilege, which is I think what this show is going to demonstrate, the rules are more so bendable. And the alcohol thing I mentioned is a perfect example of this. You can't just like go to a bar in Dubai the way that you could, let's say, in New York City, but there are select hotels that do allow people to drink. Like they do essentially have a bar inside the hotel. So of course, if you have access to that kind of hotel, if that's part of your lifestyle, that like you go with friends to a hotel club or whatever, then in that sense, your life is more closely like how it would be in another big city metropolis. So to a certain community, there is access to more standard experiences of freedom, which is why I think this show is actually going to be fascinating, because I think it's going to kind of like break that barrier and show this like tension of the old school traditional culture versus these modern people living really lavish lifestyles. And as a result, in typical capitalist fashion, being able to break the rules and do what was supposed to be behind closed doors, it's now supposedly going to be on TV. So I think Bravo is actually like a mastermind for thinking of this, because I imagine that some things are going to get filmed that for the general sort of Dubai community is going to be troubling to the local community. I really hope that they do somehow tackle homosexuality on the show. I don't know how, I don't know if that's feasible, but I hope it at least gets like mentioned somehow, and that we see, if nothing else, the women struggle to like hang out with their friends because of these pressures. Like that for me would be riveting reality TV, because that's real life. So to see people so quickly sort of like lash out and be upset by this, I think is disappointing, because this is actually, I would think, like a teaching moment, like a moment for people to see what people's lives are like in Dubai. Even if it is a very privileged, unique life that doesn't represent every single person living in Dubai or even in the Middle East, that's still an experience that's worth demonstrating. And I also think it's important for any depiction to be shown of any culture that otherwise has limited representation in media, because it's important to show, that's part of the reason I even created this channel, is to show like the humanity in people and the multi-dimensional layers to gay people, in this case to the Middle East, to Muslims. And based on some of the cast photos that have leaked of the Real Housewives of Dubai, it looks like it's a very mixed group, which is really interesting. Like ethnically, it looks like some of them are definitely like local to the Middle East. I don't know if they're local to Dubai. I don't know if they were like born and raised Dubai, or just some of them of Middle Eastern descent. But then I know there's like a blonde white woman who's, I think, from England. There's a few different like racial backgrounds and ethnic backgrounds on the show. So I think that in itself will be fascinating to see like what these women's experiences are like based on being an expat in Dubai, versus presumably being like a Muslim Middle Eastern woman who's like from this culture. Have you guys heard about this, and do you have any opinions on it?